In the past months, a viral online campaign, both satirical and serious, floated the idea that Canada should officially join the United States. The movement gained attention from political commentators, meme makers, and even a few American pundits who pointed to Canada's strong natural resources and stable political system as an ideal merger candidate. But for many Canadians, the idea sparked more than just laughter. It triggered a deeper reflection on their national identity and the value of remaining distinctly separate from their southern neighbor. While the American political landscape has become increasingly polarized, chaotic, and crisis-prone, Canada has long prided itself on moderation, civility, and a stronger safety net. And yet, beneath that calm surface lies a growing crisis that mirrors America's own dark realities: homelessness. The irony is hard to ignore. As Canadians cheer their independence from America's dysfunction, the streets of Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal are starting to look more and more like the very cities they hoped never to resemble.
My name is Daniela Bavacqua. We've been through a lot. We've been homeless, we've been not homeless, shelters, sexual trauma, a lot of trauma. Drugs, we came introduced by my ex-partner, introduced me to it a couple of years ago. I started getting into the down, and it's very hard. I just actually got out of treatment. I did 3 months, and I slipped. So I'm back on the down again, but I will get clean again.
All right, good.
It's a very hard drug to come off of.
Yeah.
Aside is crystal meth. I'm doing that too. I was just locked up in a psych ward for a month and a half because of a psychosis. I was in a psychosis for a month and a half. Never thought I would come out of it, but I did. So, yeah, thank God. Some people can stay in a permanent psychosis for life, which is scary. But right from the hospital, I went right to treatment, and then I got a treatment, and I'm here, and I slipped. It's hard. It's very hard.
Encampments, addiction, mental illness, and displacement. This isn't just a Canadian problem anymore. It's part of the same storm that's battering every corner of North America. A crisis Canada can no longer denude. Is it still possible to call Canada a safe, stable country when more people are pitching tents on city sidewalks than ever before? The image of Canada in the global imagination is one of snowy serenity, polite politics, and universal health care. For decades, Canadians have taken pride in being the quiet neighbors to America's loud chaos. But in recent years, that clean narrative has started to crack, and few things have shattered it more visibly than the surge in homelessness across the country. In 2023, an estimated 235,000 Canadians experienced homelessness at some point during the year. That's nearly 1 inch 150 people. On any given night, over 35,000 people are living without stable shelter. These are not just numbers on a government spreadsheet. They are families sleeping in their cars in Nova Scotia, seniors curled up on benches in downtown Vancouver, and youth taking refuge in 24-hour coffee shops in Calgary. It's a full-spectrum humanitarian crisis that, for too long, has been treated like background noise. The COVID-19 pandemic turned a slow-moving disaster into a full-blown emergency. Mass layoffs, rising rents, and strained mental health services collided to push thousands more into the streets. Emergency supports such as eviction bans and federal income relief helped slow the fall temporarily. But as those safety nets were withdrawn, reality hit hard, and Canada was not ready. What's perhaps most alarming is how visibly the crisis has grown. In cities like Toronto and Ottawa, tent cities have become semi-permanent features of public parks. In Vancouver's notorious downtown east side, sidewalks are often blocked with makeshift shelters, shopping carts, and the haunting presence of untreated addiction and trauma. Even smaller towns like Kelowna and Barrie are now grappling with the same scenes that, a decade ago, seemed unthinkable for places of their size. So, what changed? There's no single answer, but one thing is clear. The idea that homelessness is a fringe issue affecting only those with bad life choices no longer hold. The modern face of Canadian homelessness includes working adults, students, single mothers, immigrants, and even employed professionals priced out of housing in overheated markets. This mirrors the growing reality of what we've come to recognize as homeless in America, but it's happening right here, under the maple leaf. Some may still insist that at least we're not as bad as the US, but that logic is starting to sound dangerously outdated. If the measure of success is simply being a few steps behind a national catastrophe, then what does that say about where we're headed? From a personal standpoint, as someone who's traveled between several cities, I've been totally shocked. 10 years ago, you rarely saw encampments in downtown Montreal. Now, they're just part of the urban landscape. Canada finds itself in turbulent waters politically, and those waves are crashing hard into its housing landscape. For instance, in early 2025, a US-led trade war, complete with 25% tariffs on Canadian imports, shook investor confidence, prompting a projected 2% drop in home prices by year's end. Although lower interest rates from the Bank of Canada helped cushion the blow, the episode revealed just how exposed Canada's housing market is to its southern neighbors' dynamics. At the same time, Canada quietly imposed caps on immigration. From January to April, population growth slowed dramatically, rising by just over 20,000 people. This move was intended to ease pressure on rentals, but economists warned that without ramping up supply, the imbalance will persist. Indeed, 1/3 of renters already report unaffordable housing and growing fear of eviction. Can slowing population growth really fix a systemic shortage? That's a long story, and the citizens still have to wait for the government's movement. Moreover, the April 2025 federal election thrust housing and homelessness into the national spotlight. All major parties, Liberals, Conservatives, North Dakota P, Greens, pledged targeted measures, renter protections, eviction safeguards, and deep affordability investments. Yet, public trust is low. Around 2/3 of Canadians say no level of government is doing enough. Sometimes, it feels like politicians are promising change, but delivering crumbs. Further complicating matters, Canada's domestic politics are fragmented. Western provinces like Alberta are stirring separatist sentiment, driven in part by frustrations over federal climate policy and economic control. With regional grievances growing, pan-Canadian collaboration on housing reforms remains difficult to secure, especially when Ottawa's efforts are seen as favoring one region over another. On the legislative front, Canada attempted bold action. The Affordable Housing and Groceries Act temporarily removed GST on new rental developments through 2030, aiming to unlock billions in private investment. Meanwhile, British Columbia's government under Premier David Eby enacted sweeping zoning reforms, eliminating single-family requirements and promoting transit-oriented density. Still, implementation will take time, and Canada's housing affordability gap remains among the worst in the developed world. What will it take for earnest progress? Will Canada finally muster genuine federal-provincial cooperation? Or will political polarization leave hundreds of thousands without roofs over their heads? From my experience filming in cities from Ottawa to Edmonton, I can tell you that neighborhoods are more divided than ever. It's no longer just policy papers on a shelf. It's real people sleeping outside, wondering whose promises will finally reach them. When examining the homeless crisis, one cannot overlook the deeply connected issues of mental health and substance use. In Canada, approximately 53% of individuals experiencing homelessness report facing mental health challenges such as anxiety, depression, or trauma-related conditions. Moreover, around 45% engage in substance use, often not as a lifestyle choice, but as a coping mechanism for life on the margins. This complex intersection is widely recognized as a dual diagnosis issue, where both problems reinforce each other in a cycle that is difficult to break. In response, the Canadian government has adopted a harm reduction approach that contrasts with more punitive models seen in Homeless in America cases. One of the most debated strategies is the Safer Supply program, which offers pharmaceutical-grade alternatives to street drugs like fentanyl. Rather than letting individuals endure painful withdrawal or rely on unregulated, often toxic street substances, health providers now administer controlled doses of hydromorphone and similar medications. These are dispensed under clinical supervision with the goal of stabilizing individuals and eventually guiding them toward care. This approach, while not without controversy, has reduced the frequency of emergency room visits and created more touch points for broader interventions, including housing referrals, mental health services, and peer support. Simultaneously, Canada continues to expand its Housing First model, which prioritizes stable shelter as a prerequisite to recovery. Programs in Ontario and Alberta report that over 70% of participants remain housed after 2 years, with notable improvements in behavioral health and reduced strain on emergency systems. By treating addiction not as a crime but as a health condition, Canada is forging a more compassionate and arguably more effective path. It raises a fundamental question. What does it really mean to support recovery in a society struggling to house its most vulnerable? Education certainly plays a pivotal role. Community outreach, peer support networks, and mental health awareness campaigns help destigmatize the experience of being unhoused. In Calgary, a new mobile mental health unit has delivered more than 4,000 service visits since its launch in late 2023, connecting directly with individuals in shelters and encampments. Canada's federal government has committed over $200 million in targeted mental health funding for urban centers most affected by homelessness, and provinces are matching those investments at scale. However, sustained success depends on integration. Housing, addiction services, mental health care, and vocational training must operate in concert. One study reports that when vocational support is added to Housing First programs, employment rates among participants increase by nearly 30% within 1 year. This holistic model not only reduces recidivism into homelessness, but contributes to broader community resilience. In this section, we've navigated how Canada confronts addiction and mental health amid its homelessness crisis. Next, we will compare these efforts with responses in New York City, Los Angeles, and Kensington. Vancouver has often been viewed as the most progressive and compassionate city in Canada when it comes to social services. Its climate, accessibility to public funding, and harm reduction infrastructure make it a magnet for people seeking support while experiencing homelessness. Yet, that same reputation has created a paradox. The more Vancouver invests, the more its streets become overburdened by demand. As of early 2025, the city has over 4,800 unhoused individuals, a number that has climbed steadily over the past 5 years despite hundreds of millions of dollars in new funding. The downtown east side, often considered the symbolic epicenter of Vancouver's homelessness and addiction crisis, now spans several blocks filled with tents, makeshift shelters, and a complicated ecosystem of social workers, police, peer support, and visible poverty. The city has embraced the housing first model and harm reduction policies, including safe supply programs and supervised consumption sites. But many critics argue these policies lack balance, as they often focus more on immediate survival than long-term rehabilitation or reintegration. Others point to zoning restrictions and delayed construction timelines as key barriers to new affordable housing stock. In many ways, Vancouver is a microcosm of Canada's national dilemma, a well-meaning city caught in the gears of bureaucratic limits, social resistance, and economic pressures. Looking southward, New York City tells a very different story, par. Yet some of the themes are familiar. With a population of over 8 million, the city reported more than 88,000 homeless individuals across its sheltered and unsheltered populations in 2024. Unlike Vancouver, New York City has a legal right to shelter, which mandates that anyone who seeks emergency housing must be given access. On paper, this seems humane, but in practice, it has placed enormous strain on the system, especially with the recent influx of migrants and asylum seekers. The shelter system has ballooned past capacity, forcing the city to convert hotels, gymnasiums, and office buildings into temporary accommodation. Still, the crisis in New York City feels more hidden. There are fewer visible encampments in Manhattan than in Vancouver, largely due to aggressive enforcement and relocation practices. The trade-off is significant. More people are housed overnight, but fewer are reached with long-term wraparound services. Just like Vancouver, the city wrestles with mental health, housing shortages, and overburdened services. But the public narrative often reduces homelessness to a logistical issue, where to put people rather than asking how to truly support them. Then there is Los Angeles, the most visible face of homeless in America. The crisis here is sprawling, complex, and deeply embedded in the city's urban fabric. Skid Row remains the most infamous example. Over 3,000 individuals live in this 50-block area, but homelessness touches every part of the city. In total, Louisiana County reported over 75,000 unhoused people in its 2024 point-in-time count. Unlike New York, there's no legal right to shelter. Instead, Louisiana has leaned on outreach teams, temporary housing vouchers, and a patchwork of nonprofit-run programs. The results have been mixed. The biggest challenge in Los Angeles is housing affordability. Median rent in the city exceeds $2,800 per month, while minimum wage jobs rarely generate enough income to support even a single-bedroom apartment. Although the city passed billions in housing bonds and statewide measures like Proposition HHH, construction timelines remain painfully slow. Moreover, legal battles over public camping bans have polarized local politics, pitting housed residents demanding cleaner streets against advocates calling for greater compassion. Finally, Kensington, a neighborhood in North Philadelphia that has become shorthand for visible public addiction in the United States. Unlike LA or New York, Kensington is not a citywide crisis, but a hyper-concentrated one. For decades, the area has struggled with systemic neglect, poverty, and drug trafficking. Since the introduction of synthetic opioids like fentanyl, the number of people using drugs in public spaces has grown dramatically. Some parts of Kensington now resemble open-air drug scenes, with limited shelter options and underfunded outreach. Kensington serves as a warning, not just about substance use, but about what happens when structural decline is ignored for too long. While some nonprofit organizations operate needle exchanges and community centers, the overall response has been fragmented. There's minimal federal or state intervention compared to larger cities. And unlike the debates in Canada or LA about housing first versus enforcement, Kensington exists in a kind of policy vacuum where no solution dominates and little trust exists between government and community. Across all 4 cities, Vancouver, New York, Los Angeles, and Kensington, the causes are different, but the human outcomes are strikingly similar. Lack of affordable housing, unaddressed trauma, economic inequality, and shifting political willpower all intersect in ways that resist simple answers. So here's the bigger question. If cities with billions in funding and decades of trial and error still haven't solved homelessness, what will it take for any place, Canada included, to get it right? Crime and perception, the complexity of safety in Vancouver. In public conversations about homelessness, safety is a subject that often arises, sometimes thoughtfully, but often with oversimplified assumptions. In Vancouver, as in many cities, there's a growing debate. Are rising crime rates being caused by homelessness itself, or is the connection more complex? The truth is, most individuals experiencing homelessness are not perpetrators of crime, but rather are more likely to be victims. However, public concern tends to focus on visible disorder, property damage, drug use in open spaces, or moments of tension in crowded urban areas. In 2024, Vancouver Police Department reported a 17% increase in reports of disturbances related to homelessness. Yet a closer look at the data reveals that these incidents are largely non-violent in nature, involving noise complaints or disputes in encampments. This raises an important question. Are we using the word crime too broadly when we're really witnessing the visible symptoms of poverty and a lack of support? Many neighborhoods near Vancouver's downtown east side have expressed concerns about safety, and those concerns are valid. Local businesses have asked for stronger enforcement, while advocacy groups have pushed for more outreach, not crackdown. The city's strategy in recent years has attempted to balance both increasing the presence of social workers and health professionals alongside police. At the same time, a growing number of pilot programs are taking a different approach altogether. Vancouver has tested community-based de-escalation teams, which operate independently of law enforcement and are trained to diffuse tension without escalation. Early evaluations show promising results: fewer arrests, more voluntary treatment referrals, and improved public trust. What would happen if we treated safety not just as an issue of enforcement, but as an issue of access to services, to care, and to space? In Vancouver's case, the answer may be found in the shift toward integrated community response rather than old models of punishment. It's a subtle but essential difference, and one that challenges how we think about public order in the context of housing insecurity. Conclusion. The homelessness crisis in Canada is no longer an isolated issue affecting a few urban streets. It is a national challenge that reflects broader economic, political, and social shifts. While comparisons to cities facing severe crises like those homeless in America may offer perspective, they should also serve as a warning. What starts with rising rents and untreated mental health can evolve into deeply rooted structural dysfunction if left unaddressed. Canada still has tools at its disposal: public health care, strong social infrastructure, and a population that largely supports compassionate solutions. But without coordination, urgency, and innovation, those tools may fall short. The real question now is whether Canada will choose to act before the problem becomes too large to contain. Because ultimately, the measure of a country's success isn't in how it treats its wealthiest citizens, but how it safeguards those with the least. The time to act with clarity and compassion is now.